Well, they may be au revoir to the 8th Assembly, but how did they fare? We've got a gentleman in Abuja to do that. Markwe?
Yes, indeed, we do, Chamberlain. We have with us in the studio Dr. Emeka Okegwu, who is the National Chairman, Alliance for Social Democrats. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you. Good morning.
We also have with us Dr. Sam Amadi, who's a senior lecturer at Bayes University. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you, Markwe.
So, gentlemen, how would you say the 8th Assembly fared? They have scored themselves highly. They have said we passed this number of bills, 383. Sadly, not even up to 100 were sent to by the president. But how would you say they fared in all?
I think, in my view, they fared well. Let's put it this way. I've been a special advisor at the Senate with Ken Namane. I think, in terms of the technical work of a legislature, in terms of rulemaking, in terms of collaboration with the private sector, with strategic sectors, I think, especially the Senate, they did fantastic work. For the first time, the Senate created a synergy, a structural relationship with the Economic Summit Group, private sector. I was lucky to chair 2 technical committees of the Senate on competition and consumer protection commission and on the transport sector, where we created the National Transport Commission. We saw a greater sense of technocratic, using the technical skills to develop laws. If in terms of credibility, I think the best Senate was, of course, the one I served, Ken Namane, where we saw no issues around scandals, high level of political cooperation with the government. In terms of Senate that's had a better executive legislative relationship, I think it's the Senate of David Mark, because, of course, largely because of the psychology of the people in power then, and of course, so
well,
what I was saying,
you're looking at the different. So
for me, this Senate scores highest, even though I was not in this Senate, in terms of structured work of lawmaking.
Okay.
Yes, they have the largest number of bills. But
what I'm about to do right now is draw a table. I wish we had a board here. Yeah. I would draw a table and I will put on the.
I don't think they did the biggest bill. But they did the most. They tackled the most. For example, I
don't want to stop your thoughts. Yeah. But what I see you doing is drawing subheads under which you're going to score them.
Absolutely.
So you're talking about technicalities, for instance. You're talking about quantity of lawmaking.
Credibility in terms of public acceptance and relationship with issues around corruption, integrity, and then they talk in terms of executive.
Legislature relationship,
who had a more harmonious, and it's a function of both the people in the executive and legislature.
But in general, we're not just looking at the Senate, because so far so good. The people you have scored at the Senate, the senators.
Exactly.
What about the House of Representatives? The person who had speak there was the Speaker.
Yeah, the head of. You see, the interesting thing is that the head of the National Assembly, the Senate and Rep, pulled together. When I chaired the State Committee on Consumer Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, the work we did and the work the House did kind of aligned. You see, the leadership aligned themselves. But I look at the point is that the same volume of bills were signed, but the quality of work done by the Senate, because the Senate created a structured relationship where they developed a 21 business plan. They were more cerebral in their work. The lower, characteristically, the lower parliament was more activistic in their work. So what I see, I would score, as usual, the Senate leads. But in terms of the whole National Assembly, this National Assembly was ironically productive, even as it suffered major credibility question around the crisis with the leadership of the Senate particularly, and of course the fact that they were rebels of their own political party. So they kind of fostered a frosty relationship with the executive. But if you put that aside and look at the work they did, look at the key bills that they put across, and then look at the way in which they collaborated with the private sector, strategic sectors, NGOs, business community, business support group, I think there was a greater intelligence in the application of work. They had a stronger sense of.
So if you were to score them overall, if you were to score them overall, what do you think you'll be scoring in your assessment?
Out of 10, because they also failed in some area, but out of 10, I will score them 7. And for me, 7, even though I'm a liberal lecturer with marks, 7 is good. Or
I should
6
come
and
to
a
your
half.
school then.
Or 6 and a half, yeah.
6.5, 7. That's what Dr. Madi is scoring them. Do they score that high in your assessment?
Well, interestingly, I was also a consultant to the National Assembly in the 7th Senate, and I'm also a lecturer in the university.
I hope you're a liberal lecturer. Are you a liberal mark giver?
I'll be scoring against specifics.
Okay.
And let's look at, the major role of the National Assembly. It's make laws and then carry oversight. We must be able to look at the capacity or the instruments available for people to make laws. And the first to be a legislative library, and to what extent that library is in use. What happens is that 80% of the times, consultants are brought in, proposals or reports are made or given to the senators, but hitherto, before becoming senators, just like we now have new people coming in, have there been any compendiums of these activities of the Senate? Has there been any retreats where, reports are reviewed? Has there been any capacity building programs that now actually help these senators in being able to do the major work? And when I say this, some people are like, what are you talking about? I say it's actually the Senate that prepares the appropriation bill. What government, just does is produces the, proposals, or what you call the estimates, the budget estimates. It is what comes out of the National Assembly that actually becomes the bill. Okay, so it's not necessary that what is put in by the executive, and 80% of the times it's never that way. So the question will be, what will be the capacity? What is the capacity? What was the capacity? Vis-a-vis tools, vis-a-vis training. Okay, vis-a-vis preparing these people in knowing how to be able to do research.
Well, the budget work is definitely a very big one. In that area, well, how would you score them?
Like I said, I wanted us to set the perspectives. Okay, so that when you're now scoring, what you'll be scoring is how many of them went to a library. I have this.
So you're breaking down even that one.
Oh yeah, that's the beginning.
Yes.
Okay. If anybody wants to score you as a reporter, it is not what you read on your teleprom. Okay, it is who wrote that teleprom and what input you made into that teleprom, and how prepared you are before you come and interview your guest. It's not when somebody has a microphone and is telling you, okay, ask him this, or they bring a paper and say, ask this question. Okay, so
I'll leave that one out.
No,
because at the end of the day, it's the work that they presented that matters.
No,
tell me.
Yes,
I mean,
what I'm trying to say is
yes, so that we don't confuse our viewers. If you were to look at the appropriation in terms of the politics that has gone on before now and the politics that characterize what we saw in this assembly, how would you say that they fared?
Well, in trying to assert themselves, I think they fared well. In trying to assert themselves, okay, as an independent arm of government. But in the oversight, I would score them below 0.
They'll get a minus there.
I say below 0. I will score below 0 because, you see, part of why we also have a lot of the misdemeanors, okay, or what you might be able to call policy gaps or program mismanagement is because of oversight. And it is the Senate that has that, exclusive right oversight.
It is interesting that,
So if you don't get that right, then you might not also now find out why projects are not working.
Do you think that happened? I mean, if you're scoring them, I can't remember off the top of my head now, any major problem that came up, or would I say scandal, that came up as a result of the oversight functions of the National Assembly.
That's why I'm scoring 0.
It's not to say that it didn't happen.
No, that's why I'm scoring 0.
I'll give them benefit of doubt.
It simply means that everything,
off the top of my head. I still recall some from the 7th Assembly. I recall the investigation. Is that from the 6th Assembly or from the 7th Assembly?
Which one?
The investigation done by Magnus Abe into the downstream sector of the petroleum industry, which also snowballed into the one done by the House of Representatives.
That is what they call oversighting.
But I mean,
those are the kind of sounds. Those are the kind of.
If there is no scandal, maybe there was some reform in the executive arm of government. You can only oversight what I mean.
Okay, so
there will be a scandal if only there's something going wrong.
So that means the executive did perfectly well.
Did they?
Well, that's what you're saying.
But in terms of the budget,
yes,
how would you score them? I mean, would you say that we saw as much rancor as we would normally see in terms of the preparation of a budget? Before we would see this rancor over the benchmark price of crude oil, for instance.
Please remember.
It was seen that was absent.
Remember that when the Buhari administration came, they said they were going to be introducing what they call the zero-based budgeting system. In other words, what you call the needs-based budget or demand-driven budget. We didn't see that. Okay, we still saw the envelope system where funds were allocated. And again, I keep telling people that budget is what it is. You know, some financial plans that you have cast in figures. Okay, it does not translate to, you don't have money and then you start budgeting against the money. You know, the program action aspect of it is actually when you now have where releases are made, you know, against projects. And this is where you now have environments. And this is where oversight now become very, very critical.
But
okay?
Let's talk about the preparation of the budget. How would you score them?
Again, I'll score them very lowly.
Why?
Because if you said you are going to be doing demand-driven budgets, then it simply means that you are going to be doing those budgets based on oversight and not based on what you were given. You were supposed to be doing, you know, very primary, you know, source information. You were going to, whatever was given to you, shouldn't have been just, well, they did so well in trying to, you know, pick out one or two, you know, details. But I would have expected that, and this is where the legislative support, you know, group that I'm talking about should have come into place, where we're able to say, you know what, this is what it is you're bringing, but this is what it is we're going to stay on ground. Are you able to just oppose this and let's be able to now energize? Okay, I didn't see that happen. So, okay,
budget performance is still very low. So
no, we're not talking about budget performance. We're talking about budget preparation.
I'm trying to say that even while, you know, we might not be able to remember major scandals off the top of our heads. If you look at how the budget performed, and some people will say it performed below par, we're still not seeing budgets that ought to be doing as well as they ought to be doing. Maybe 80. We're not seeing budget performances in the 80% or, you know, thereabouts. And to that extent, you know, questions should be raised by the National Assembly as to how the executive is doing. Would you hold them to account there, Dr. Mani?
I think it goes back to the two issues you raised. One is capacity and one is leadership in terms of oversight. And let me step back. In 1995, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa issued a statement on a report on the capacity of legislative business. And they've observed that they are grossly underfunded, grossly incapacitated in terms of human resources, libraries, resource material. Now, take it this way. If you look at this Senate, and this, let me put in perspective, my scoring them high. I'm scoring on policy leadership. It's clear that they avoided some areas they didn't have competitive advantage or where it was difficulty. Sharaki...
Like which areas?
For example, the area of oversight. I didn't see rigor. Not even quarrel. I'm not going to... You won't look at the quality of oversight by scandals. You look at the quality in terms of how the legislature build case around where they're going to. I've been the National Assembly and I was chief executive for 5 years. Throughout, not just this one, the concept of oversight in Nigeria is just a joke. Oversight does not mean legislators fly into, you know, fields and platforms, maybe oil rig or oil company, or come to NEC or come to channels and later on. No, oversight means that the experts are first sent to get documentation, walk through the process, generate red flags. And these are the things that are used for the so-called hearings.
I just remembered now. I mean, I've just been reminded now that there was the sacking of the SGF, or the scandal around the SGF.
If you look at that scandal,
which was, you know, brought up by the oversight,
for example,
or
of what?
Of the National Assembly,
no,
of the Senate.
The point is, sorry, a second, Bokwe. The SGF did something wrong. The Presidential Committee, led by the Vice President, indicted him. The National Assembly picked it up, invited him. He didn't respond to them.
Oh, so that came from the executive arm of government.
What I'm saying, it was already a tribal case that is open and closed. You know, so this is not the kind of rigorous. Under the Constitution, you do oversight for two issues. One, oversight to generate inputs for lawmaking, so to see that whether the laws you made are working. For example, electricity sector, I was in NEC. All the time they call me, bring your books. Nobody has called me. Nobody called me to say, bring the policy, the record of your commission that shows how you came to this tariff. Because that's the thing you oversight, to see whether we are applying the principles of regulation, whether we are evidence-based, whether it's based on the science, or whether it's based, for people are alleged that I reduced tariff to favor PDP, which is a big malpractice for a regulator. This is the kind of things you oversight. Then you go through the process, interview us, go through the process, and find how we build our case. The hearings we had with regulated entities, the research our committee made globally, did jurisdictional comparison. This is oversight because you are looking at the policy implementation of the laws you made.
So that kind of oversight was missing?
Never happened. I didn't see any rigor. There's no oversight, and that brings an issue. When I was with Ken Naman, we wanted to create what we call the National Assembly Budget and Research Office, NABRO, which is equivalent of the Congressional Budget Office. And the idea is talking about budget preparation. It's not the legislator who goes and the nitty-gritties and the science of figures. It is this backbone, support base that, like in the US, the MBO, the Management and Budget Office of the Presidency, monitors the budget and everything. The Congressional Budget Office monitors. So there's some sense in which science meets science. So you are dealing with expertise, meet expertise, you review. But now we're dealing with legislators. Their job is basically, they come from all kinds of, even if you're a professor of law or economics in National Assembly, it's not their job at that moment to be digging through details. That's why you have to have legislative support group. Now, some of them hire their cousins, friends who are not qualified as aides. They don't have institutionalized competence. PAP, which should now become Nigerian Institute of Legislative Studies, where I teach as well. I teach administrative law for them. And one of the things that created that PAP, and by the way, I wrote the bill first under Ken Naman, was chairman of Intergovernmental. What we did was to say, look, the PAP, Policy and Research Program, supposed to provide technical support for National Assembly. The work of legislature everywhere is the work that is structural. So what oversight, I scored them very low because it didn't see any rigor. For example, congressional hearing, also called parliamentary hearing. You just invite IG to come and IG comes, you field 1 or 2 questions, you hail him or you condemn him, walk away. What research case notes have you used to interrogate the IG? Because you're talking about policing. So the presumption, if you watch other countries like the US, for example, there will be sessions where these Congress people look like they're too smart because they're drip fed by a line of experts, and they've first done research on the policy outcomes they want to interrogate, and they're building or they build a case evidence to interrogate. You invite a person, he comes here, he speaks grammar, you ask him questions you have no knowledge about, and then he shines and he go home, then that policy crisis is not addressed.
I also noticed something. I noticed something within the National Assembly. So, for instance, talking about the technicalities which Dr. Amadi raised, you'll find that oftentimes some legislators might come to complain about a certain area or a certain sector or a certain subject. And then you find out that the committee in charge would stand up to say, or the chairman of the committee in charge would stand up to say, no, my colleague is misinformed there. It was saying that there was no information sharing within the National Assembly such that the committees seem to be operating as silos. I noticed that with transport, there was some scandal with the transport sector when Senator Ashafa tried to douse the tension amongst his colleagues, especially with regards to budget. I noticed that with regards to health as well. I think only in the closing days of the National Assembly, the health minister was summoned, but the chairman committee of health was saying that, his colleagues were not quite informed as to some of the pronouncements that they had made. Sadly, he wasn't around while some of those assumptions were being made. So how would you suggest that subsequently the Ninth Assembly, this sort of pitfalls, for instance, are avoided, and perhaps a little bit of information share is introduced within and amongst committee members?
You see, when you create a back end, what that back end allows everybody is what you call an information pipe system. And the moment you tap into it, every information you need is available. So it is just to be able to create this back end, and which is what I called a legislative support library, okay, where you have everything everybody needs to know about every subject, being loaded in. And for whatever doubt you have, you first interrogate the system. So it's a lot easier for it to be a database argument. Okay, this is what data I have, and this is what data you have. The moment you are able to now interrogate how that data, was processed, how that data was collected, okay, then it becomes a lot easier for everybody to be on the same page. Remember again that some of these issues that are raised are also seen as being partisan in nature. Oh, we've raised this issue to embarrass our principle. And then people now begin to now take unnecessary sides. But I don't see anybody who's taking any oath of office into the National Assembly holding their party constitutions. Okay, the best you might be able to put on your neck might be your party flag. Okay, the best you do is to hold that Senate rules, the Constitution of Nigeria, and probably a Bible or a Quran. So the moment you get into the National Assembly, you become, you know, a legislator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. However, when you do not have what to chew on, you tend to create your own dummies. So what you see now happening is that people now, you know, trying to play roughshod or trying to now create scenarios that really don't exist or that are backed by facts. Which is why you now see somebody saying, no, you don't have your facts right. No, this is not true. No, this is true. In oversight is supposed to be program-based. It's supposed to be timelined. They're supposed to be instruments. And then before you do an oversight, there must have been a first visit, okay, by people who are technically competent. Okay, what you call CPRs, competent, you know, persons who now give you what they call a CPR report, a competent person's report.
Well,
okay?
I do know that, you know, this question of oversight is going to continue into the 9th Assembly. But I would suggest that we, you know, extend that discussion to the 9th Assembly.
Yes.
Especially as some. But I want to focus a little on the politics.
Yes.
You heard Honorable Dogara saying that this Assembly was the most harassed in the history of assemblies in Nigeria. He felt that they were the most harassed. How would you say the politics of the emergence of the leadership, which Dr. Mahdi has said, you know, borders all credibility and acceptance, how would you say it affected its relationship with the executive? And to what extent would you say that Nigerians benefited from that? I mean,
nobody was harassing Dogara until he ran with what, you know, the APC believed was their thing. When he was in the APC, he had the joyride. And because we play the politics of winner takes all.
Did he? I mean, because even his emergence was not exactly accepted.
Can we? That's what I'm saying. That's how the harassment started. Because the APC said, you are holding on to what belongs to us. You cannot leave the APC.
But it's the APC then. It was
APC. No, the harassment didn't come until he became APC. The initial harassment was the initial gra-gra was what is happening now. This is the choice of the party. Okay, the party has come out to say we have two choices. However, in saying that he was harassed, every legislative house in Nigeria is harassed by the executive, is intimidated by the executive. Okay, so that assertion has to be driven by, are you going to be towing the line? And he said that harassment is to their...
Let us continue this conversation, because I definitely see that it's going to be one that is controversial. Are they about to win a trophy on most harassed assembly? Let us hear what our guests have to say on that when we come back from this break. Dr. Emeka Okiegwu, National Chairman Alliance for Social Democrats, and Dr. Sam Amadi, Senior Lecturer, Bayes University, are still with us in the studio. And we're talking about how the 8th Assembly fared. Just before we went on break, we're talking about, assuming there was a trophy for most harassed, will the 8th Assembly take it? You were weighing on that.
Yes, I think perhaps they will fight it with several assemblies. For example, let's start with Chibok Kadebo. We saw a very frosty relationship with the presidency, and he was supposed to be the president. Senate president, he was out. All these guys from Imo State got in. Okay, and one of them got in. Later got it, and it was the quarrel with Obasanjo. Kenaman was supposed to be the Senate president. Kenaman was a party choice. The legislators, largely the northern senators, chose Ken because they said this is a digital senate. We want our own person after one brother. He had good working relationship with the cabinet, but didn't have with the PDP leadership. I didn't have with the president himself. Third time came in, he rode it, became a hero. Now, David Mark was only president, I think, who will lose this trophy for sure. Because under him, he worked most harmoniously with President Jonathan. He was so powerful, he made decisions, nobody restrained him. This and that. Now the question is, and if you look at parliaments all over the world, in the US, we see that parliaments always sometimes tango with executives. So it's not a justification for low productivity.
The question is, did that affect their productivity? That frosty relationship with the executive, how did Nigerians benefit from it? Because they believe that that is the nature of of Parliament, that they would never be in agreement. I mean, you heard Speaker Dogara who said, woe unto any exactly that agrees with the executive.
I don't agree. Now, let me tell you one thing. When we came in with Kenaman, we tried what we call third way. And third way is first. We said there's a way of aggression. Chibokadibo quarrel with president. The way of subservience, which Mwabara and Werem. And there's a third way, a way of interdependence, a way of co-management. The high mark of legislative business is not antagonism to executives, no. It's interdependence. Because if you look at the Constitution calls them co-managers. For example, budget, like it says, estimate come from executives, the National Assembly takes ownership, the president signs it, lawmaking. So a smart, disciplined National Assembly would emphasize two things. One, we are interdependent. We're not going to be unduly obstructive. So taking a trophy by saying, look, it ought to be in your face, challenge the executives is wrong. But if you tell me we ought to be independent, and that's why you have to do the rigor of oversight. Secondly, the soundbite. Many Nigerians are tied to soundbites. So if a National Assembly person comes and abuses the president on the floor,
but they were harassed, weren't they?
They were harassed.
I mean, we saw that mace being stolen. We still were not able to unravel
for example,
who did it, even though we saw a lawmaker going with these people.
What I'm trying to say that the harassment comes with the tough, because we're living in a country where, first, we don't respect separations. For example, if you look at some MDA, when I was in NEC myself, legislators harassed me. At a point, the deputy governor of Imo State now called me and said, look, you and the everybody's complaining against you. Because I was viscerally opposed to harassment, because I knew I came from the Ghana for school of activism. The point is that we live in a society, in a democracy where the refinements of separation, of limit of power, the National Assemblies themselves overcarry themselves. Why should the National Assembly go to a MDA and ask you to submit a list of those you want to employ? I told them that's not your work. Your work is to oversee the Federal Charter Commission.
That certainly is not the 8th Assembly.
It's the 8th Assembly. Didn't I just branch out of... I just left...
NRC.
I left the 251. So my answer to that question is, yes, this Assembly suffered heckles because, for one, the issue around corruption which they faced. Of course, the federal government prosecutes crimes. So if they are prosecuting the chair of the National Assembly, it creates impression. Of course, it creates the dynamics of hostility. Second, we have a president who, perhaps because of some psychological makeup, did not kind of defer to them in the way that had with the previous presidency. So it also creates a sense of isolation. But interestingly, this National Assembly worked with the Presidential Committee on Ease of Doing Business very well. They work together when there's need for that. So I would think that their failures should not be attributed solely to heckling from the executives. It goes with the tough.
But it did go beyond heckling. I mean, the National Assembly was shot, was sealed at the peak of the political crisis. But, you know...
No, I didn't say, sorry, I didn't say they did not. They heckled them well. There was a clear, blown-out conflict. But the question is, I'm saying, in spite of that, I think they made progress with these areas of policy making. In spite of that, they failed in the area of oversight. And in my view, they also failed to recreate the brand of National Assembly. We saw some behavior. For example, in the House, somebody went and saw a newspaper about NEC and went to the House. At the end of the day, they said, you are free. There are so many needless, media-driven, populist-driven engagement of National Assembly that distracted from the real focus. You don't need to run the National Assembly on television. There's too much television. And by the way, it was Ken Naman who introduced television during the third time debate. But it has now become a soap opera, largely. And the real work that happens, just like a lawyer, your work happens in chamber. Legislative work happens in committees, happen in oversight, happen in research-based libraries. But oftentimes, we see a proclivity towards drama. And those drama further compound or exaggerate the conflicts between the executives and the legislature.
Let's go to Lagos now and take some questions.
Yeah, gentlemen, just a few questions. Dr. Madi, some of the issues you raised concerning the performance of the 8th Assembly, particularly when it has to do with their oversight functions. Now, some of them tell us that what operates here, which you highlighted with respect to those legislative aids, they say in some of the countries you cited that a lot of those professors, the associate professors, the experts, they have several groups, including civil society groups who help. In fact, number one, they do some of those research. They fund some of those experts who are attached to those legislators. But over here, they say that, look, the civil society groups, they play adversarial role and not the support role, except for Plaque and one or two others who helped one or two of those committees and the assembly. And that's what gave them visibility. And then they say, in addition to that being a broken system, they say, look, the qualification of the legislators is not a factor. It's not really huge. So those, they think, are what we don't have going for us here. And that's what's affecting the quality of those oversight functions that they undertake.
Well, I agree with them that they've not harnessed, or the NGOs, by the way, there are few developmental NGOs in Nigeria. Many of the NGOs are NGOs that are living on funders' agenda. So PLEC can do a lot more because it has funding from foreign people to focus on illicit business. But take it this way. The National Assembly collects 15 or so million quarterly. Some say this is not our salary, it's for our office. Elsewhere, there's no reason why it started with Anyam, unfortunately, when an attempt was made to remove him, and wisely, he collapsed the financing. And so everybody in the National Assembly has their money, so nobody worries about it. But that's the money you should use to hire experts. That's the money for bureaucrats, servicing the bureaucrats in the National Assembly. I agree. And that's part of what the United Nations Economic Commission of Africa said long ago, that African parliaments are understaffed and underfunded. So those funds that are meant for policy work are being used as their money for your campaigns. So you can't eat it, you can have it. Something will give up. So I agree with that they don't have too much support group working for them. Because, of course, many of them, too, you see, two issues. One is disposition as a legislator. If you come with the idea that you want to do work, then you're going to look for people to help you. When I became special advisor for Ken Namani, it's because he has that penchant for quality work. And I was begged to join. There are many people out here, so many people who can render free services to National Assembly as part of supporting their country. The question is, do you have the disposition as a legislator to seek out knowledge, to look for people to support? Do you even have the orientation, the idea that this work is not just about standing up there and, braggadocio, make speech, that you need to build case study and case flow to help you present good arguments or make good laws?
Well, Doc, some of those you cited, I mean, they had the penchant to dig deep and then deliver results, perhaps as a result of their interest or qualification, as it were. So if we don't do something about the requirements to get into that house, do you see anything changing moving forward?
I think what will change is public expectation. For example, you see, if you look at all over the world, there are many legislators who don't have, by the way, John Major of Britain didn't have a proper degree. Thatcher had something equivalent of OND. So these are senators and reps are well educated enough, but the Nigerian society, the culture of democracy in this country is a culture of low expectation. What do we expect? Is there an accountability procedure? If you look at all over the world, constituents are asking questions of the legislators. We had erosion, we had crisis, we had flooding. What did he do? And people are going to look at his report card. He or she will prepare a report card before the next election. But what do we get? We get a process where people are saying, how much did you give us at burials, at funerals, at marriages, and they will re-elect you. So we are benchmarking low expectation. It's a vicious circle. So the legislator goes there, knowing that, look, nobody cares about this productivity. We assess our legislators on what they call constitutive attracted project. Their major work is legislative. And so it's like, it's self-reinforcing. If we improve expectation, if we use the right benchmark to assess their quality of work they have done, then it will inspire them to look for support, for help. Nothing says that the best politician will be the most educated person. It's not true. Many of the great leaders in parliament, in the executive, by the way, what we say today applies to the executive. Executive failed miserably in developing coherent policy framework. And that's why it looks like Saraki, is now basking in glory. We didn't see that robust policy formulation that characterizes executive this time, because we perhaps didn't go out of our way to look for those who can do that work. So my plea is, look, Ninth Assembly, realize that a legislator's job is not to do everything. That fund, use it to hire experts. Let other support groups provide support. NGOs should transition from just being on the street to providing social knowledge for production. production of ideas, policies, laws that solve problems. All these are clamor on newspapers, on the street. They are good. They will create an equivalent of Arab Spring, but they will not create transformation. And therefore, transformation is institutional. You need to help National Assembly to perform, and they must be able to be helped. Don't just come to Abuja and then feel like you are on top of the world. You are here to do work. You don't have to be a professor of economics or law or sociology. You simply have to be realistic enough to look for help when you need it, and realize, the leadership now must realize that, look, this is a game of harnessing capabilities to help the executive to develop transformation. The executive too must realize that National Assembly is an independent branch of government. Allow them their idiosyncrasies and some of the things they do. Don't go and try to micromanage what they do, instead of developing your own competence and then putting them on the defense so that they have to do the work. But we saw both branches of government not doing much in terms of policy rigor. We have trader money, where we had community banks, like my friend said here, and nobody's using them to administer that intervention. We saw a very good poverty initiative being kind of failed because it didn't connect to the mainstream of economic policy making. In China, they had 7 levels.
I'm going to have to interrupt you, because we have another guest.
Okay,
Gentleman in Lagos, any further questions?
Yes, please. Dr. Okegu, this one is for you. Now, you remember that the leadership of the 8th National Assembly began with largely members of the same political party as the executive. Yet there was a lot of friction between the two arms of government. Doesn't that indicate that there was no cohesive legislative agenda of the ruling party, that any member of the political party who fell into the place of leadership could have championed?
Well, you see, that's the point I've been trying to make all the while. That what happens in Nigeria is that we never end politics. Okay, politics is an unending thing. From the moment you become candidate to the moment you become winner of an election and you're sworn in and you continue your route, you remain a politician and you keep playing politics. Otherwise, there is no law in our statutes that says that a leading political party must produce the leaders or leadership of a National Assembly. It's just a convention. Okay, but now you find senators going to shake the hands of presidents to show loyalty by dropping out of a race. Political parties now making pronouncements that he was going to be winner take all, they were going to be taking all the committees and all that. And by so doing, what it is you have just said is to set the premise for politics to never end and the governance to start. And this is a major, major problem that we're having in Nigeria and that we're going to be having in the 8th Assembly. You see, what should happen is that you're now seeing, people come out to say, oh, because I'm a loyal party member and my party has made a choice, I'm going to stand by the choice of our party. Now, what does that tell you? It simply tells you that capacity is out of the window, okay? Program is out of the window, policy is out of the window, understanding, what you might call the cross-cutting issues is also out of the window. Now, you also see another sect saying, oh, I listened to a politician who said, oh, how can? There are 7 meat in the pot, and there are 6 of us, and you want one person to chop out the whole 7 meat. No, that doesn't happen, and politics and governance go together. You see, it's not that way. Politics and governance, politics leads to governance. But the moment it gets to that point of governance, governance takes over and politics takes, the backstage. If I knew you were going to be introducing me probably as a chairman of a political party, I'd also say to you, please remember, I'm a development specialist. But it's okay, all right? Now, but what are the issues that we must contend going forward? Each time you look at the National Assembly, and they're in session, and any senator or legislator stands up to, raise a point of a matter of national importance, you'll be surprised that it has to do with his locality. Either some houses have been burnt or some, but I have not seen any senator or legislator who's reason to say we have a problem, arising from the challenges in the Sahel region that is forcing over 20 million people on forced migration into our country. Nobody has ever brought that kind of a matter of national importance. Nobody has ever said, listen, I listened to the central bank governor this morning, and he is in charge of a monetary policy. And he says, if we are not very careful and create jobs, we are going to enter into a worse recession than the one we just came out of. I have not seen the National Assembly or anybody in the National Assembly stand up to raise that kind of a matter of urgent and national importance. And what would this be meaning?
Dr. Okegu, doesn't that in any way, doesn't that then, Dr. Okegu, doesn't that then put a question on the quality of knowledge or the quality of activities on the floor of either of the chambers or both?
That's why I scored them 0.
So going forward,
what
would be your word to the ninth? What would be
until
then?
We're able to get that back-end capacity, until we're able to build those back-end structures, until we're able to get them to understand. I mean, I didn't see any senator being handed volumes of what had happened, any of his senator-elects in their retreats. I didn't see them being handed documents. I didn't see them being handed bills. Okay, I didn't see them being handed packages. I didn't see any of such things. So if you don't have knowledge of what had happened in the past, how are you going to be able to, start
one moment.
Contributing to what can happen going forward?
One moment, Dr. Okegu. You are in the opposition. I mean, one would have expected that if you perceive, you and other people, other political parties, if you perceive that things weren't going the way they should have been, we expected that you guys would be talking. And if we don't hear that kind of pressure, no one is going to know there is anything going wrong. I mean, what do you think?
I am not in the opposition. I'm a Nigerian, and I'm a senior citizen of Nigeria.
But you are a chairman of a political party.
Politics is over. What we have now is governance. I'm Nigerian, and I'm just not only Nigerian. I have children and grandchildren, and I'm a development expert. So I am not talking as an opposition. I'm talking about from somebody who has knowledge of development. Okay, so each time we keep talking about this opposition, how many people who were in the opposition now became, proposition? So what is important is that we must end this talk about politics. It's over. Okay? Now the law courts are there to decide, it's not in the realm of the law courts. As for politics and politicians, I think what we should do is to be able to take politics to our libraries, okay, to our other rooms, and I begin to re-strategize for the next season of politics, which is going to likely come in the next 4 years, apart from the 1 or 2 season elections that are going to be happening. But right now, please do not refer to Dr. Emeka Okengwu as opposition. I'm not opposing anybody. I am a Nigerian who is interested in this country's development, because I don't have any other passport. I don't have any other place I want to go at over 55. I want to stay here and enjoy my retirement.
So even at that, I mean, if you're a development, you are a development and not an if. You are a development expert. If you say that you're not seeing the kind of rigor that you ought to see from the National Assembly, don't you have a duty to talk?
Haven't I said it here?
No, you are before.
Okay, then you've not been following me.
Politics.
You've not been following me. I've said it. I keep saying it. Like I said to you, I'm a lecturer. I teach in a university. Okay, I do consultancies here and there. I'm invited to programs. I just came back from Lagos from the LCCI where I did a paper. Okay, I've been to 1 or 2 places where I've been delivering papers, and all my papers are development based. So it is not a question of, that's what I'm saying. You don't have to shout. I've told you I was consultant to the 7th Assembly too. Okay, it hasn't stopped my work. What's important is that when you asked me to score, and you said, you hope I'm not a benevolent, I said I was going to score -0.
Yeah, and in the area of oversight is what you said. I mean, in the area of oversight, you will score them -0 is what you said. In other areas, under other subheads.
Yes, remember.
For instance, I mean, you created quite a number of subheads.
Okay.
In terms of their technical work, he believes that he did some technical work and they did pretty well in that area. He believes that they engaged pretty well with the economy, that they even did a greater job trying to reflect the economy than the executive arm of government did. Are these points on which you agree with him?
It's the legislative work is all about policy development, if you may, or policy oversight, if you may. Okay, execution is not their job, so there's nothing they can do by their work to reflect the economy directly without involving the executive.
Yeah, but indirectly.
No, I'm coming.
Yes, indirectly,
you asked me a question.
Which they have powers
now,
over.
what we are trying to, the alarm we are trying to sound is to say, listen, you guys, like my brother and friend has said, don't come and show us soap opera, wear your starched agbadas and then make flowery speeches. But you were talking about trophy. Yeah? I don't think the assembly will be the ones to qualify to even go for that trophy, but the members of the assembly. For me, two people stand out, again for maybe the right or wrong reasons. I'll be looking at Shehu Sani, okay, and I'll be looking at Dino Milaye.
Dino did that standing work.
But until Dino became opposition, okay.
I don't know why that has to come with a chuckle. if he did outstanding work, he did outstanding.
No, because until he became...
Unless, of course, there's something else.
Yes, so there could have been a... But take it or leave it, you must give it to him, okay? Dino has presence, okay, if you like him or not. And he does his work well. I mean, all the whistleblowing that he did on the floor of the House were well researched. I mean, he stood up and he brought facts to the table. Ditto for Sani, who was actually, the major reason why, the SGF matter didn't die. Okay, so on an individual basis, you now find out that these guys went out of their way.
And of course, Abaribe, don't forget.
Oh, yes, Abaribe, my elder brother, my friend. I'll give it to him too. Okay, one or two of them. The Senate president, also did well. But
Behind
you now find out that...
They mentioned Senator Olujimi. So
yes, Olujimi, oh yes.
Fantastic.
Oh yes.
My committee.
Oh yes. Oh yes, Olujimi. She also did well. But you find out that you now have this, out of 109 persons, we've been able to just mention maybe less than a dozen names. Okay, that shows you, remember I was talking about this information pipe. That's very important that everybody has access to. Okay, and this is where the library thing, I have this, friend who said to me that he had just gotten a job, or he had a job in the Canadian lower legislative house. And that after 6 months, he found out that his pressure was 180, 140.
His blood pressure.
Oh yes, I said, what happened? He says, man, that when they gave him the job, he was jumping and thanking his staff, fat salary, but he could barely sleep a wink.
Wow.
Demands of research and research from members. He was working 27 hours a day, and he couldn't take it anymore, even with all the support staff he had. So now that tells you that every legislator who wants to stand up to talk, wants to talk with facts.
Absolutely.
That is what makes you a legislator.
So this is word for the Ninth Assembly.
This is what they must do. The moment is not fact-based.
Yes.
You are going to be having different shades of designed agbadas, different shades of talk, different shades of hot air being blown, and then you bring in the politics of partisan politics. Right now, none of them answer senator of APC. They might have APC flags in their cars, but they are known. They are going to be sworn in as senators of Nigeria. Yes, party affiliation must play. There's no way you cannot be able to bring it. But remember that the APC constitution or manifesto can only become part of a program of government when it comes in as a bill, at best policy.
Okay. Well, that is coming from a party chairman. Your closing
well,
words
I think,
now, especially as we look forward to the next
as a
assembly.
governance professional, I would say two things. You see, what he has said is a good agenda, but it can't work except the party keys into this idea. Why is this so? These legislators have their eyes on the second term. Politics is a career. And what we've learned, Paul Collier, the economist at Oxford, said very clear. It's a career, so if the system invites only criminals, then those who are there will learn crime in order to follow their business. So first, the party should first come with a commitment to legislative agenda. And so that their members will know that when they are doing this robust, heavy lifting, they are being recognized, not being demonized. So if, for example, the script coming for the party leadership is heckle these guys, attack these guys, and this fine legislator is speaking grammar, working this rigorous work, employing these heavy lifters at the back end, he will lose that, and down the line he opt out. So our system should have reward, incentivize the search for development by legislators. That's number one. The second point that's very critical here is that we should not develop constituencies, civil society groups, and all of us, who will now begin to benchmark. You see, governance is an interface between the people and those in government. If we don't help them set parameters, if we don't create early on an expectation that we're going to assess you, not how many times you raise flag or you follow us to shout down on Buhari, but we're going to assess you on how much you have helped the executive develop the economy. One thing that Ken did very well.
Okay, I'm afraid we don't have a time for the example.
That support for legislative framework for good governance. That we're a developmental state. We need to have harmony between executive and legislative. We want to see the executive supporting the legislature with ideas and values.
It's a fine place to live, it, gentlemen. We have to thank you both for coming on Sunrise today. Dr. Emeka Okego is a national chairman, Alliance for Social Democrats. You also heard him read.
And a farmer.
He's also a farmer. Dr. Sam Amadi is a senior lecturer at Bayes University.
A non-politician.
That is for this segment. Sunrise today continues in a moment. Please stay with us.
It's the Channels Book Club's Literature Prize Season 4. This year, the winners get a sponsored trip to one of the world's most exciting book events, the 2019 Bouchercon Convention, taking place at Dallas, Texas, United States.